Okay, so we are now in record mode. And as I mentioned, we have about 1.5 inch diameter. You can see it fits into the palm of my hand. It is a piece of Sculpey that I did get it right out of the box. And so it needed to be softened. So you just have to work it around with your fingers a little bit. You can squeeze it, pinch it, whatever you want to do. And you'll be able to tell because it'll start feeling real soft and pliable and easy to work with. So this is the size you want to work with. Now let me show you what we're actually going to be making our skull today. So I have an example right here that I made earlier today just to show you a little bit of how we're going to work. And you can see underneath. Okay, so this is where we're going to be in the demo today. Now, if you make a skull today and it doesn't turn out exactly the way you want it to on the first go ahead, we're recording this. And I'd like you to try and make, more than one attempt, because remember, we're going to do with the clay what we did in drawing. We're going to modify the skull to fit a character, and then we're going to turn our skull. We're going to build a character on top of the skull. So we're not going to do that today, but today we're just going to build the skull. Okay. So the first thing you want to do is you want to get your clay to sort of mimic what we do when we're drawing. So what I'm doing is I'm taking and I'm trying to give a nice egg shape for the cranium on the side like this, pushing the forehead back a little bit, the frontal bone. And do you see how I'm pulling down the front where the jaw is going to be and the mouth? So when we do our drawings, we draw the oval, we put an arc and a small arc for the jaw, finish that up. So this is about where you want to be. I'm going to hold it a little closer so everybody can see. So go ahead and, play around with your clay for a second. I'll give everybody a second to get something that looks like this. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to hold up a few tools. So one of the tools of choice, toothpicks. So these are very thin and small and hard to see in the camera. I get it, but that's what these are. In addition, I told you that you could buy some very simple tools. They sell them in 10 packs. I've seen them at Michael's. I've seen them in the school store. I've seen them over at our other favorite art store, which I'm forgetting. Yes, thank you. So you can see this is a wooden tool and it kind of curves up to a point. If you had an old popsicle stick, you could take an X-Acto blade and cut the edge so that it's angled. And you could make a tool similar to this. You could sand it a little bit or not. It's got a big end there. These are plastic versions. Okay, so it's a little bit rounder on the end here. This gets a little bit smaller on this end. So there you go. You can see a nice variety of tools. Okay, so and this is another wooden one that has a real nice sharp edge to it.
Yes, they're wood, but what are they called?
They're called clay modeling tools.
Okay.
So there's really no fancy name. It's just a pack of 10 clay modeling tools, and the ones I'm talking about are the plastic ones.
Okay.
It's probably like $4 or $5 for 10 of them. It might even be cheaper at Michael's. So I've got an extra ball of clay where I might use some of this if I need extra, but there's a little bit of a subtractive quality to this in the beginning. Okay. So some of the extra clay that I pull off of this piece that I'm starting with is going to go, I'm just going to put it on there just to store it until I need it. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line across where my brow ridge would be. So I'm just rolling the skull across my tool. I have this nice sharp edge here. So it's easy for me to do that. If you have a toothpick, you can do that with the point of the toothpick. All right, so just by doing that, that helps me to see where my glabella is going to be and so on and so forth. So I'm going to put a little mark on either side of the glabella. Okay, so I'm putting a little mark here and here. And on this side, I'm going to push in. I'm going to turn my tool and push in at the arc of the brow. And then I'm going to slide some of this clay off. Do you see how it pulls off there? I'm just going to pull that off. And now I have a negative. See how the lighting in my room causes a shadow? So you can actually see where the orbit or eye socket is going to be. So I'm just going to do that on the other side as well. So I'm pushing down there on top, and then I just slide my tool and it just pulls off a chunk of clay. And now look what we've got. Just by doing that, you already have something that's starting to look like a skull, and we haven't really done much at all. But what's cool is you have this nice center spot in here. So what I'd like to do is push my tool in the middle and just sort of dig out a bit of clay. And I like to say it with a little English accent. It doesn't really sound like an English accent, but I like to say a bit of clay. So you can see how I just pulled out a bit of clay. Now it's hollow for our nasal cavity. All right, so that's where we're going to start. Now I'm just going to use my fingers. And remember, this clay is now soft, but already I have like a little divot in the head here, which I want to kind of smooth out. So occasionally you're going to have to repair as you're working. You might squeeze this a little bit as you're working, and then you'll have to go back and just repair or smooth out any edges. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my tool and I am going to draw a line that goes across the side of the skull, and it comes down towards the cheekbone and then goes back like that. So it's like a little C, a backwards C. Okay, and then I'm going to press down with my tool on that line, and I'm going to pull out a chunk of clay. And now I'm subtracting again, but this time I'm doing it on the side of the skull. And of course, all the extra clay, I'm putting it back on that piece that's on my table. So I'm going to go back in here and just kind of dig out a teeny bit more, because I don't have my cheekbone established yet, but I know that it's going to be going right across here from the side view. So I want to make sure that I have enough of the clay taken away so that as I build that cheekbone out, it will really start to become prominent on the side. You see how that looks? Okay, so this is where I was before we got to here. So we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So you figure out where your cheekbone is going to be, your zygomatic bone. You draw a line, curve it up. Now I'm just going to dig in there. And by the way, if you don't have the right tools or you don't have any clay today and you're just watching, that's good enough for me. Then you can always go back and do this at your own pace. Or if you are participating, but for whatever reason, you're not happy, hey, you can go back, watch the video. You'll be good as gold. All right, so now I'm going to go back on this side because I was squeezing this side and I feel like I lost some of that nice negative space that I pulled out. There you go. All right, so I'm happy with that. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of clay, and when I mean little bit, I'm going to put it on my hand here so you can see. It's just a small amount, and I'm even going to take half of that. And that is going to be rolled in my hand. And then I'm just going to take the top part of that, and I'm going to pinch it flat. And I am going to build it on either side of that little hole for the nose. So now I'm going to take half of what is left and pinch it. And I'm going to build it up on the other side of the nasal cavity. So now you can see how I have these flat pieces sticking on the side. They're not really forming my nasal cavity the way I want it to yet. So I'm going to take my little toothpick and just press down on the bottom. So now it looks like a triangle. And then I'm going to push in a little bit more so that I can remove or actually just hollow out. If I push in a little bit deeper, it makes for a nice deeper shadow set for the nasal cavity. I'm going to bring the bottoms in a little bit. And then I'm going to pinch the top just so it forms that nasal bone that's coming out. So sometimes you have to go back in and model if you lose the shape the first time. And I know that we're working rather small, so it's going to take some going back and forth. So now you can start to see how that nasal bone is sticking out on the side and how the nasal cavity is starting to form. All right, another thing I like to do is I like to take some clay, roll it in my hand. So I have more clay than I did for that nasal cavity. So I'm going to show you about like that. And I'm going to set that across for the brow. And what that does is, you know, our brow, somebody just asked me a question. Hold on. Let's see, Aaron, is this Zoom just going to be the skull sculpt? Right now, that's what it's looking like, Aaron. What else did you want to do? Not sure. All right, here we go. So I put a little bit on the front of the forehead. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my tool and I'm going to lift up on the bottom towards that piece that I just put in. And with my fingers, I'm going to start to push the two together so that now I have a little bit more of a deeper set brow. I'm going to do that here as well. And then I'm going to push in the middle for my glabella. And I'll just kind of roll the tool on the side. So you can see on this one where we did that. Okay, so that's what we're doing here. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I want to establish my zygomatic bone. So I'm going to take another piece and roll it in my hand. Yeah, so just reading the chat here with Aaron, and if you have a question, anyone, about what we're doing, I'm starting out with this, and we're going to see how long this takes. And if we have enough time, we'll do our drawing lecture. Otherwise, we'll save that for Wednesday. Because I really want to dedicate a little time here for you guys to have some understanding of how to work with the clay if you've never done it before. All right, I'm laying my little rolled piece right on the side there. Okay, so you can see that that's starting to come out just like your cheekbone, your zygomatic bone. And then we're connecting it to the side of the orbit right there. And we'll do another one on the other side. There we go. And I'll just break it off right there. Cool. And then with what I have left, I can roll it a little thinner. And I can take part of it and bring it up to connect to our nasal cavity. And we'll do this on the other side. And this sort of finishes off your zygomatic, or I'm sorry, your orbit. So there we go. So we're kind of losing our nasal cavity. So we're going to pull that back out a little bit. And now I'm going to take my tool and I'm going to push into the sockets. And by pushing that in, you're getting a bigger negative space. That's going to make it feel deeper set. And you'll get more shadow that way in your orbit. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my tool and I'm going to come down here and I'm going to cut out this lower part of the clay so that you can see it's almost like taking, sculpting the first part of the skull without the jaw. And then we'll take some of that clay that we just took off and we'll roll it. And you know what, I'm going to set this down for a second because I want you to see in here, what I did is I built the jaw separate. And you can see underneath its shape, and then I connected it to the other piece. So I'm going to do that here. I'm going to roll this. I'm going to curve it like this to give that feeling of the jaw. And then remember, we have the condyloid and coronoid process. So we need to roll another piece. And this piece is going to come up on the side. It'll angle up like that. Here's your coronoid and condyloid process right there. So we're going to do that on this side too. Let's get another piece, roll it. There we go. Now we're going to connect this to our skull. So now that we're pushing that together, we don't want to squeeze too hard because we want to maintain this feeling underneath that you get when you lift up your skull and look at it. Now what we can do is we can start smoothing out, and we're going to add a little piece across for the maxilla. So we'll flatten this out. We're rolling it, and we'll flatten it, and we'll lay it across the top. Now I'm going to take my tool and I'm going to blend from the side of the nasal bone down into the maxilla. Push that down, push up the cheekbone so it's going more towards the orbit. Pinch this in a little bit if I'm losing shape. And then also make sure that my chin is coming out properly. So if you look here at the side of the skull, you can see that you don't want your chin coming out further than the forehead. Now, I feel like I've lost volume. So I'm going to take a nice piece of clay, flatten it off like a pancake, lay it on top, and give myself a little bit more volume for the top of my skull. All right. So just by adding on a little bit more clay, smoothing that in, I'm feeling better about the overall prospects of what I'm doing. All right, now I want my cheekbone to look like it's going over the jaw. So I'm going to push down here and I'm going to remove this little piece that I had as part of the condyloid process. And I'll take that extra piece of clay and I'm going to create my zygomatic bone one more time because it looks like it's non-existent, and it's probably just because my fingers are squeezing it. So here we go. I'm making a nice rolled piece in here. Take about half of that, lay it right across here for your cheekbone. What you're trying to do is get that feeling of the jaw extending underneath. All right, there we go. So that's the feeling we want to get. Getting there. And I feel like it's doing a better job over here. I don't feel like I've lost as much for my zygomatic bone. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit of clay where our teeth are going to go. So I'm going to put some clay here where my top row of teeth are, and then I'm going to put another small piece right coming from underneath that where the bottom row is. And then with my toothpick, and this isn't perfect in any sense of the word, but I'm going to press down with my toothpick and give the indication of the separation of the teeth. So again, this isn't rocket science. It's definitely not perfect in any way, shape, or form, but it will give you that sense of teeth rather than having to sit there and mold and sculpt every single tooth. Going to give a little bit more volume because I still feel like I'm losing that based on what I started with. So you can see I'm spinning it around, using my fingers to blend. You can also use your tool. So that tool, it doesn't take a lot of pressure to go in there and push down and smooth out some of that feeling. So anyway, here you go, 2 skulls. The one prior, the one we just did, you can see all the way around. I'm going to turn off our recording and then I can see what you guys created.